Welcome back to the Tango Banter, everyone. The summer is in full swing. We are halfway through the year, and it looks like my dance card is filling up for the rest of the year. I wanted to let you know that I will be DJing and teaching at the Montana Tango Festival in September. If you haven't checked it out, the link is in the show notes. Very exciting. It's a very beautiful part of the country. There's going to be mushroom hunting. There's going to be hot springs involved. I think we're going to need that at the end of this summer. So check it out. The link is in the show notes. Also, for many of you who did not make it to my musicality webinar that I held at the end of May, I wanted to let you know that the recording of the webinar is available for purchase. So if you're really curious, the webinar was on the topic of the most essential musicality concepts that you need to know in order to succeed as a social dancer. So you can get the recording to that webinar. The link for that is in the show notes. And speaking of webinars, I'm actually planning to do another musicality webinar later in the summer. And if you have specific topics that you would really love for me to cover, or you have questions that have arisen since you attended the last webinar, let me know, because I'm collecting ideas right now for what topics to cover and would love to get your input on that. Now, today's topic is a very deep one for me. I've talked about confidence in different contexts as a requirement for different aspects of tango. So today I decided to actually directly speak to confidence in the context of feeling good about your dance itself and dancing confidently and appreciating yourself as a dancer. I think some form of a question about confidence is probably my number one question that I get. Most people, and I would say I hear it mostly from women, and that might be because I'm talking more to women than men. I know that men have to deal with confidence issues as well. But as a woman, speaking to a lot of women, of all of the, topics that we might cover on our learning journey in tango, confidence is right there at the top, because it seems like you might be taking lots of classes, you might know a lot of vocabulary, you might have a lot of experience under your belt, and still that does not equal confidence. And when it comes to really defining what confidence or self-confidence is, when I was starting to ask this question of myself, I kind of was observing the fact that anytime I hear some sort of motivational speakers or coaches talk about developing self-confidence, it would frequently be mentioned in the same sentence as self-acceptance or being yourself. So for a long time, I didn't really understand what that meant, because I was like, well, I am myself. Who else would I be? Like, I am myself and I don't feel confident. Being a social tango dancer and succeeding on the social dance floor requires three different aspects: movement, mindset, and musicality. I feel like those are the three building blocks. I talk a lot about it. These are kind of the blocks of my teaching philosophy, is that in order to be a well-rounded social tango dancer, you really need to have those three things. You'll go far with one or two of them. You might, succeed to a certain level if you just have one of them. But it's really the interaction of those three components that adds up to a successful experience on the social dance floor, I believe. And of those three, I think mindset is the most layered, the most complex, and it's kind of the deal breaker. Of the three, if you're missing the mindset piece, that's the one that kind of stunts your growth the most. And confidence is really part of the mindset. Now, your mindset is very much dependent on your knowledge. Like the more you study musicality, the more your mindset would change about, how to express the music. And also, your mindset is very much connected to the movement. The more you learn movement, the better you move, you change your perception of yourself, and that informs your mindset. But you can have two of the three. You can have the movement piece and you can have the musicality piece. And if your mindset is not, let's say, in line with what you really want from your dance, it will forever haunt you. And confidence tends to be this obstacle for a lot of people. That there are so many dancers that I've met who are extremely gifted, beautiful in their own right, wonderful musicality, great technique, and they feel terrible about their dance, and they speak so poorly about themselves, and they have so much judgment about what's lacking in their dance. And it's almost like with certain dancers, like they can't even take a compliment and directly accept it. They have to sort of negate it. And a deflection technique, I'll compliment the dancer and say, "Oh, you're dancing so beautifully." And they'll be like, "Yeah, I'm trying, I'm working on it." And that's very common. And that's like, one of those little signals of what is our mindset about our own dance. Now, for women, when it comes to self-confidence, I think a huge piece of that comes from body image. And for me, the body image piece sort of drove a lot of my evolution in tango. And it was an obstacle to me for a long time. There's a certain body image in tango that exists as the ideal, let's say, and it's not necessarily prescribed. It's not like we have to look that way, but because we see it so much, then there's a certain perception we have of ourselves in reference to it. And a lot of us don't look like the perfect image of a tango dancer. Perhaps we're older, we're bigger, we're taller, we're shorter. There might be a lot of aspects to our bodies that don't match the perceived ideal. And that can be a source of a lot of suffering, because for a lot of us, we kind of associate our lack of a certain quality with the amount of dancing that we're getting. The body image is something that we develop throughout our lives. And depending on the lens through which we look at body image, the lens could be our culture, a particular time that we were born, our family, cultural standards. All of these are lenses that we're looking at our body through. And when we start tango, little by little, we actually start confronting these beliefs that we hold as a result of looking at our bodies through all these lenses. And it doesn't feel very comfortable. And I don't know if a lot of people go through this process on purpose, willingly. I think being a teenager is traumatic enough for a lot of us that we don't necessarily want to go back and deal with a lot of the questions about our bodies the way we had them when we were young. But when you start dancing and you start looking at yourself in a particular way, you start comparing yourself to others, it necessarily brings up a lot of those obstacles within ourselves, these beliefs, these limiting beliefs that we might have about ourselves. When I was in middle school, I came to the States when I was a teenager, and I really had this belief that I was too butch, and I was always taller than other kids. I was always kind of like more broad and more athletic. And especially when I moved from Russia to Texas, I was surrounded by people who looked very different. And, and I think, I don't know for sure, but it felt like in Russia, there were more tall girls. There were taller girls than me. And I didn't necessarily feel so big. But when I moved to Texas in my class, a lot of the girls around me were much, much smaller and they were daintier. So I developed this self-image that I'm really butch and masculine. One of the results that happened as I grew up is that I continued to feel that I didn't really deserve to be feminine, that I looked weird if I wore makeup or if I was too feminine or wore different types of clothing. Recently, I've had multiple conversations with women who shared their own version of this. One of my students, when we reviewed a video of her dancing, and I pointed out that there was something beautiful about how she expressed a particular passage in the song with her free leg, and I was encouraging her to do more of that. And she said, I just don't feel like I'm supposed to do that. That if I do that kind of expressive movement, that it would look silly and it will look absurd and people will laugh. And it hit me so hard because I was like, oh my God, I know exactly how that feels. There's this awkwardness, almost like an embarrassment that we feel. Another dancer in the community was complaining to me about being too tall. And there's actually a few women who have reached out to me for advice or just to comment on how difficult it is to be a tall female dancer. And she really struggles to find that balance between accepting the fact that she's really tall and not trying to pretend she's not. And then also connecting with other dancers and getting the dances that she wants. So there's this conflict that happens for us when we face these obstacles. And it's really easy to see proof of that belief being correct. Like if someone has a belief that they're too tall, you might say to yourself, I'm too tall. I never get dances. People don't want to dance with me because I'm too tall. And then what ends up happening is as you carry on that belief, any type of quote unquote rejection or any failed capaceo can become proof that that's real. That's why. And we can just perpetuate and make that story real for ourselves. And I definitely used to do that a lot when I first started tango. And even, back in 2018, when I had my big breakup with tango and I decided that I wasn't going to dance anymore, a lot of it came from my admitting to myself finally that I cannot continue the facade. I cannot continue to pretend that that's who I am. I was really tired. It just wasn't me. It wasn't my truth to continue seeking some sort of validation, external validation in the form of dances with popular men, leaders. It was so much work, and it was all based on me not accepting who I was at the time and feeling like I was lacking in all these ways, that I was already too old and I was in my early 30s, that I was too fat. I mean, it's silly, but that was, the mindset that I was too fat and I was basically, looked the same as I do now. And that I just wasn't desirable. So I definitely succumbed to that belief. And I had a lot of proof of that that was right there and obvious. So I definitely feel like it's easy to get carried away in that direction because the proof seems obvious. However, I had to admit to myself that along this path of me making up my mind about how tango is and that I'm not good enough and I don't have what it takes, I would see from time to time examples of the complete opposite. So I would say, well, I'm too fat and that's why I'm not getting the dances. But then I would see dancers who were heavier than me and they were getting dances just fine. Or the feeling like, oh, I'm too old, I'm being aged out. Dancers don't want to dance with me anymore because I'm not young. But then I would see dancers who were double my age and they were getting the dances. And even when I'm thinking about height, I remember when I was in Buenos Aires during my second trip and the very first milonga that I went to, I got there early. So there was just one couple dancing in the center, like people were just arriving to the milonga. And this couple was so different from anything else that I'd ever experienced as a representation of tango. She was probably 1.5 feet taller than her partner, and she was dancing in sandals. She was this beautiful, tall, Germanic-looking woman with long, reddish hair. They were dancing in open embrace. The way she was dancing, I was like, oh my God, she looks so cool. I want to be her. She looks so assertive, so herself. Like, it was mesmerizing. And I never forgot her, like it's been so many years and I still see her dancing in my mind. That's how profound it was. So I would see all of these examples of the opposite of what I feared to be the reality. And I didn't know what it is that they were onto. Like there was something that they got that I was missing. That's kind of how I saw it. But I could tell that it had to start with me stopping pretending that I was who I wasn't as a dancer. This woman who was sharing with me about being really tall, she shared that one thing that she was getting really tired of was that everybody was giving her advice about how to be better. So she said, I have to be allowed to be exactly where I am. And when she said that, I was like, boom, yes, you are. That's really where I felt I began to shift in my own thinking, and the letting go of the striving to be someone else meant that I had to be okay with who I was, where I was at that moment. What I noticed that once my mind was sort of off of this hamster wheel of pretending that I was something else, I began to feel an actual expression in myself. Like there was all this room now for me to actually feel what I was feeling, because I couldn't really care about what it looked like at that point, Like I just had to dance. I just had to dance and accept what I was feeling and how it was coming out of my body, however that was at that moment. And because I didn't really stress out about the way it looked, I relaxed more into just the playfulness of the dance. I kind of on purpose didn't care about my aesthetics. I gave up sort of looking for technique in a certain way. And at the same time that I was doing that, I was exploring dancers who were very inspiring to me. So I was watching a lot of videos of dancers that I admired. I would play their videos in slow motion and watch their movement. And when I would go to the milonga, a lot of times I noticed that the visuals of those dancers in my mind would play during certain portions of the milonga, especially if the song that they were performing played at the milonga, I would see it in my mind's eye. And so I would start imagining that I was that dancer that I was admiring in the video, and I moved like them, or, pretended. I didn't actually know if I moved like them. I just imagined it. And by the time that I started making videos of myself, it was interesting to realize that no, I didn't necessarily look like these dancers that I was imagining, but there was something there that I was recognizing. Like there was some portion of the dance that I held in my body just from my imagination already. And that made it more easy for me to begin to accept not just my internal experience of how I feel the music, but also how my body looked as I was expressing the music. And this transition is really climactic in a certain way. I know for a lot of dancers, they never get there. It's very scary to look at yourself and to see how your dance really looks, because we're afraid that we're going to discover that we really don't look as good as we think we do, or that we hope we do, we feel we do. And there's a lot of cringe, that fear of the cringe. But ultimately, the benefit of looking at yourself is that path to confidence. And, true confidence in your dance really comes as a byproduct of confronting these different parts of your beliefs and your limitations, your fears about yourself, and making to the other side of that fear. And only I can do that for myself. Only you can do that for yourself. Nobody can win those battles for us. This is almost 100% internal journey. The other day, my student actually vocalized this. We were dancing in a session, and then we were watching the video, and I was commenting on how beautiful her dance felt and how good her movement was. And as she was looking at herself, she says, what I see in my mind is so different from how I look. I see myself as this, graceful swan, and what I see is the complete opposite, which I felt, I felt that so deep in my heart, because that's such a common feeling for women. It was a very common feeling for me for a long time. And I said to her, that feeling that you have about imagine yourself being graceful and elegant, keep doing that, because that's what your partner feels. That's what I feel. And that was a huge epiphany for me, that when we imagine ourselves dancing beautifully while we're doing it, and even though you might be whatever height, shape, size, you still imagine yourself being dynamic in the way that you want to be and expressing yourself to the degree that you see yourself expressing, you want to express yourself. Your partner is going to feel that. They're going to see that in their mind. That's what I see. I see that, I feel that through the way the person is touching me, the way they move around me. So you can practice that in a real way when you go dancing, to give yourself permission to imagine that you are someone different. Your mind is your playground. So when I dance a lot of times now, since I'm leading a lot, I imagine a lot of the male leaders that I admire. I imagine I'm them. I imagine walking like them, expressing the music like them. And that's just the way I do it to further and further develop my style, develop the way my dance looks. So my confidence, which is ever expanding and growing as it is for everyone. I think everyone always wants more confidence depending on where you are in your life and in your tango. My confidence really developed as a byproduct of going through these different stages in my dance. And I think my journey is particular to me. Everyone will have slight variations to how they explore tango and how they evolve in it. But I think we all at some point face common obstacles, common questions about our self-worth, about our body image, and whether we will be accepted the way we are and whether we get to be as beautiful as we want to be. So when I'm thinking about the concrete steps I took to get there, I can see it as an evolutionary path. I think at any stage that we're at, there are very concrete things, very practical things we can do to gradually build confidence in a real way, not just in this like, I just choose to be confident or some sort of saying an affirmation like that. That can go so far, but there's particular active things we can do that will result down the line in more confidence. So the number one step is to really come to a place of self-acceptance. And to me, that starts with just close your eyes, feel the music, and be in the moment. Don't think about looking at anyone else. Don't think about looking at yourself. Don't care what you look like. Just focus on the music. And I recommend this for anyone who's feeling really frustrated with their dance and you're sort of at this place of like, I don't know what else to do. I'm trying this and nothing's changing and I'm about to quit and nobody understands me. So if you're at that phase, then you have my permission to shut out any other feedback. You don't have to take any advice from anyone and just reconnect to that place in yourself where you're lost in the music. You check out, you go for a little ride over the rainbow while you're dancing. You don't have to remember anything. You just let yourself be. You accept your imperfections, your mistakes. That means when you mess up, you don't apologize and you don't qualify your dance by saying you're a beginner. You just accept what comes up as it comes and let yourself be there. And who knows how much time you need in that phase, but I would say probably within a few months of doing that at the most, you'll feel sort of a desire. That's what happened for me. There was this desire to actually look a particular way. You start seeing shapes and you get inspired by other people. You get inspired by other dancers. So this is the second really practical step, which you might be ready for. And that is collect inspiration. Think about if you could be any dancer, no limits. If you could just push a button and be any dancer on the circuit, who would it be? Maybe it's multiple dancers and maybe you appreciate different things about different dancers. So you can watch videos of your desired dancer in slow motion. This is one of my favorite ways to study dancers, is to put a particular performance I really like and play it in slow motion and just watch for little nuances, watch for details of expression, certain things that you really appreciate of how they do a certain thing. And just allow that to inform you. So when you dance, you develop a mental image of gestures and particular types of musicality that you appreciate, and you start channeling that. It's not like you're trying to do it. I definitely don't want you to try to copy it by looking at the video and then looking at yourself in the mirror and trying to do it. Like, don't seek the artificial. Just try to absorb it through osmosis. Let yourself imagine it. So self-acceptance leads to being inspired by other dancers. So you collect that inspiration during that next phase, and it very naturally goes into the next phase of development, which is this channeling of your inner image that you're seeing in the dancers that you observe into your dance. And it's really fun to play with it, because what I noticed during certain songs, I'll see a specific performance by a particular artist, and I will want to express that energy, and my partner will feel it. And it's really a fun way to explore musicality as well. I do this a lot as a leader. Now, the last phase, so we've gone through 3 steps, and the fourth step to this build up, this structure of what we are seeking, of confidence, is to see yourself, to spend time with looking at yourself and assessing your own movement. And it requires a level of courage. It requires a bit of discipline, because so many of our beliefs show up when we look at ourselves and we criticize all of the things that we see that are wrong with us and our movement, how clumsy we are. But guess what? At that moment, when you feel all of that, you look at yourself and you think, oh, I thought I was like this, but really look at this. I am terrible. And this is wrong and that's wrong. Guess what you have to do at that time, at that moment? You have to go back to step 1 and you have to accept. And that's the next phase, the next layer, right? You have to accept that next phase of going, okay, I accept this is where I am at now. I don't need it to be different. I just need to see it, accept for what it is, and then continue doing what I'm doing. Go through steps 2 and 3 again. Look at other dancers that inspire you. Watch their videos. And one of my practices, this is something I'm doing now several times a week, is I will watch a particular video of a dancer I like in slow motion, and then I would make a video of myself dancing. Then I would watch that, and then I'd go back and watch the other video again. And just going back and forth, there's something that starts taking place in our brain where we begin to consolidate what we're seeing in one dancer and what we're seeing in ourselves. And I guarantee you, if you do this consistently for a month, even less, a couple of weeks, I think you will start noticing that you look like the dancer that you are admiring. And then, this would happen to me, people are going to start telling you that you look like that dancer, and they'll start complimenting you that you actually have the same aesthetic as that dancer. And that happened to me, when I finally, I don't know, maybe a year ago, somebody said, oh, your dance really reminds me of Chicho. And I was like, oh my God, what a compliment. I could not have asked for a bigger compliment, because I really admire his dance. I watch it a lot. I really love his musicality. And when I dance as a leader, for a lot of the songs I dance, I imagine that I'm dancing like Chicho. But of course, I know I'm not. Like, I know ultimately my dance lags far behind what Chicho is capable of. But this is the way I practice. What I've come to realize, and the way I see dancing, tango in particular, is that the body to me is an instrument. Some dancers study dance as its own thing, separate from music, and they really, really feel the music from the inside, and the movement is the music itself. For me, I'm a dancer that's driven by music. And I really believe that every single person, every single body is its own instrument that is unique, and only you can play that instrument. Only I can play this instrument. And it's kind of our responsibility, in a way, to discover how to play that instrument, how to express ourselves through that instrument. And by doing this work of developing confidence in your dance, you're doing a service to everyone else in the community who dances with you, because that kind of confidence and self-acceptance is contagious. And when I'm around people who are really comfortable in their skin and who can really I can really feel that quality from them, it makes it easier for me to feel the same way. So I'm going to leave you with this one metaphor that I've been playing with, and perhaps you can treat it as a bonus step in your evolutionary process towards more confidence on the dance floor. And that is, imagine that you are an instrument in the orchestra. And as you're listening to the song, which instrument are you? Which instrument are you dancing? And maybe it's an instrument that's you're hearing, but maybe you're your own instrument and you want to support the song and express a different shade of sadness through playing the particular passage in a particular way. That's the level of creativity I think we're all invited to explore on the dance floor. And the more you get in touch with that creativity, the more confidence it gives you. And the more you become the dancer that you want to be, which then gives you more creativity and more curiosity and more confidence. So the momentum kind of builds on itself. And that's what I found for me, that once I did the hard work of accepting everything I was afraid of being true as being true, and I don't have to fight it, then I was able to grow past that and really see my dance as a unique expression of this body. And this is really what I feel I saw in those dancers that defied the norm, dancers who were too tall or too fat, and they were still getting all the dances. And I was like, how are they doing it? I think that's what I saw. I saw them being themselves. At the beginning of this episode, I mentioned how I didn't really get how confidence, self-confidence equaled being yourself. And this concept of being yourself was so confusing. And all these years later, what now I understand it to mean is this process of that the more we accept our imperfections as we go along and work through that and develop ourselves as dancers, and the more confidence we have, it comes from the discovery of that inner core that's ourselves. And there's nothing else we can be. So just how we accept that, if you're an instrument, that you're a violin and you're just going to be proud of being a violin, and you're not going to seek to be a bandoneon. And if you're a bandoneon, you're not going to want to be a piano. And maybe you're a horn. We don't have any horns in tango, but perhaps you might be the first one. But you get my metaphor here. I hope it's clear. It's just, I really see the whole process as a fine-tuning of ourselves as instruments. And that doesn't need to take a huge amount of time. You don't need to wait years to get to this point where your dance becomes good enough. It can happen like right now. But for a lot of us, we have to face these different layers of beliefs about ourselves. I've recently taken this motto to heart. One of my teachers always says, success is not personal, it's structural. That we all can be successful in what we're after if we put a structure in place and we follow that structure. So I hope that in this episode, I've provided some things that you can use as a structure for you to gradually build your self-confidence. And I am curious which piece resonates the most with you. Which one are you excited to try out? And if you have a particular dancer that you wish so badly that you could dance as, let me know who it is. And better yet, maybe even post a link in the comments to your very favorite performance by that dancer. And let me know why you love it so much. I really want to know. Okay. Thanks for staying with me on this journey, and we will continue the banter next week. Until then, ciao.